It is 1987. There's no internet. There's no streaming. There's no algorithm serving you content that you didn't ask for. What there is 4 channels on British TV. And everybody is watching the exact same thing, including the ads. Now, imagine that one of those ads ends on a cliffhanger. And you have to wait weeks or sometimes months, because it is broadcast TV, to find out what happens next. That's exactly what Nescafé did with their Gold Blend campaign. 12 episodes, 6 years, slow-burning love story told entirely in 45-second chunks. And when the final episode aired in 1993, 30 million people watched it. Put that in context, it's nearly half of the population of the UK. 30 million people for the finale of a coffee ad. So today I want to break down how they did it and why it worked, and why this campaign, made almost 40 years ago, before the internet existed, is probably still one of the most relevant things that you can study if you want to understand modern brand storytelling. Let's go. All right, let's put this into context. To really understand what Nescafé pulled off, you need to understand the media landscape of 1987. I was 8. I was watching Saturday morning cartoons. So there's no ad blockers, there's no skip button, there's no second screen to scroll while the commercial break runs. You're sitting on your sofa with everybody else, and you're watching literally whatever comes on. But here's the thing, that actually made advertising kind of lazy, because if audiences can't skip, then why bother making something they would want to watch? You just need to be like loud enough and memorable enough to stick. Nescafé and their agency McCann Erickson asked a different question. What if, instead of making one ad people might remember, you made 12 ads people couldn't stop thinking about? What if the commercial break wasn't the interruption, but it was the destination? And to be honest, here's something that still blows my mind about this campaign. It's this. Newspapers ran advertisements telling people when the next episode of a coffee ad would air. Newspapers. People needed to know when it was coming, and they didn't want to miss it. So the premise here was pretty simple. Tony and Sharon are neighbors in a London apartment. They're both professionals, and they both appear to be single. And the first time they meet, it's because Sharon knocks on Tony's door to borrow some coffee. She's having a party. It's Gold Blend coffee, obviously. Tony is played by Anthony Head, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Sharon is played by Sharon Mon. And she's a classically trained actress who had worked in some pretty serious dramas at the time. And these are not people you'd typically cast in a coffee ad, but that was the point. McCann Erickson, they weren't making a commercial, they were making a drama. A properly written, performed, directed drama. Just happened to be 45 seconds long and happened to feature a jar of instant coffee. Each episode ended on an unresolved note. Will they get together? Did she see him with another woman? Is he interested? Is he just being polite? The will they, won't they tension that drives every great romantic drama. They compressed it into a 6-year, 12-episode campaign, and the UK went absolutely mad for it. So in 1987, The Sun, the UK's biggest tabloid, runs front page coverage of the campaign, like not a feature and not a lifestyle piece, the front page. When Tony finally confessed his feelings for Sharon, the headline was, "I love you." People speculated at work what would happen next. Couples discussed it over dinner. Letters were written to newspapers taking sides. The actors were so convincing that much of the British public assumed that they were actually a couple in real life. Of course, they were not, but the fact that people needed to check, that kind of tells you everything about how invested the audience had become. And for me, here's what's interesting from a pure storytelling perspective. Nescafé didn't run 12 versions of some salesy ad. They wrote an actual story arc. It starts with a chance encounter Sharon borrowing coffee, a moment of connection. Both of them slightly awkward, maybe slightly interested. Then it builds. There's complications. Other people enter the picture. Misunderstandings arise. The relationship stalls, then surges forward again. These are real narrative beats that you'd find in a 6-part drama, not an ad campaign. So 5 years in, the year's 1992, they finally get together. And then, because no good story ends easily, they break up. Sharon calls Tony in the middle of the night. Only the coffee, she says, reminds her of him. Yo. And then the finale, 1993. 30 million viewers. Tony says the words he's been holding back for 6 years. So 30 million people watched that last episode of a coffee commercial. To put that in modern context, that's more than the average viewership of the Super Bowl in the UK for an instant coffee brand. That's what story does. Real story told with some patience and some craft. It makes people care. It connects people emotionally with the brand. Now let's talk about the numbers, because the business results matched the cultural impact. Glasses, because I already told you how old I am. 30 million viewers tuned in for the final episode of 1993. 50% sales increase. UK Gold Blend sales during the campaign's initial run, 1987 to 1993. 75% overall sales growth across the full decade of the campaign's influence. And number 20 on ITV's best ads ever. It was ranked in 2005, over a decade after the campaign ended. So I got to tell you that it's that 75% figure that I keep coming back to, because it's not just about the campaign period. The story they told changed how people felt about the brand for an entire decade. And remember, this is happening while Starbucks was on the horizon. Like, fresh brewed coffee was gaining ground, for lack of a better pun. The conventional wisdom would have said instant coffee is losing. Compete on price. Compete on convenience. Instead, Nescafé competed on emotion. They made instant coffee feel aspirational and sophisticated, and something a stylish, intelligent person in a nice London apartment would choose, not because they said so, but because Tony and Sharon drank it. So here's why I think this campaign deserves a proper deep dive in 2026. And again, that's 40 years after it first aired. We talk about branded entertainment as though it's a new idea, as if it was invented by some digital agency in 2012 when YouTube became a real platform. As if brands only recently figured out that storytelling works better than shouting. But Gold Blend did it in 1987 with no internet, no algorithm, no ability to target, track, personalize, just a story, a cast, a camera, and a 6-year commitment to seeing it through. And that commitment is the thing that most brands still can't bring themselves to make. A story like this doesn't pay off in a week. The first episode of Gold Blend wasn't a sales event. It was an introduction. You were meeting Tony and Sharon for the first time. Nescafé had to trust that the audience would come back. They did. They came back 12 times over 6 years. And what the Gold Blend campaign proves, and this is a lesson that still applies today, is that audiences, they don't resist brands. They resist bad content. They resist being interrupted. They resist being talked at. Give them something genuinely worth watching, and they will not only accept the brand, but they'll actually invite it in. They'll wait for it. They'll argue about it at dinner time. They'll read the newspaper for when the next episode is. The campaign also spawned a novel, a video compilation, 2 soundtrack CDs. Like, spin-off products weren't an afterthought. They were evidence that the audience actually wanted more of the story than the ads could ever possibly contain on broadcast television. And that's what happens when a brand stops making ads and starts making content that people actually love. Gold Blend's direct influence runs through a lot of what we now consider modern advertising. The Christmas ads from John Lewis, the ones that the entire UK waits for every November. They owe a debt of gratitude to Gold Blend. The idea that an ad can be like an actual event, that people can anticipate it and discuss it and share it. That's Gold Blend's legacy. In the US, Taster's Choice ran basically a similar format, same actors, same kind of approach, and it worked just as well over there, which told the industry that this wasn't just a British quirk. The whole model, it traveled. And then YouTube arrived, and that's suddenly the distribution problem that had made this kind of campaign very expensive and difficult, and like took years and years and years to see the benefits. Well, you needed to buy airtime and negotiate broadcast slots. That all disappeared with YouTube. Anybody with a good story and a camera could now build a serialized, episodic, branded show and put that directly in front of an audience that wanted to watch it. So Nescafé spent 6 years and 12 episodes proving that the model works, that audiences will follow a story told by a brand if the story is worth following. They proved it before the internet. They proved it before social media, before any of the tools we now take for granted. The tools have changed completely. Truth underneath, it hasn't moved an inch. So if you want to watch the full Gold Blend campaign, there's 12 episodes. It's all on YouTube. I'll try to link it in the description. Honestly, sit down and watch them in order. The filming doesn't hold up, but the story does. And if you want to go deeper on the history and strategy of branded entertainment, how we got from a 1987 coffee ad to where we are today, I've got more coming on this channel. Subscribe so you don't want to miss it, and I'll see you in the next one.